Welcome back, Recruit. In our previous lesson, we discussed how to create a simple class and then add attributes to that class. Now it's time to discuss methods. Methods are functions defined inside the body of a class, and they are used to perform operations with the attributes of our objects. You can basically think of methods as those functions acting on an object that also take the object itself into account through the use of that self keyword argument. Let's go through this with an example of another class. We will call this class circle. And then let's create a class object attribute. Remember from previous discussion that the class object attribute is going to be some attribute that's going to be true for any instance of the class. So for our agent, all agents are going to be living on planet Earth. So if we scroll down here, something that may be true for any circle is the fact that we can estimate pi to be 1 or 3.14. Now, it doesn't matter how large your circle is, that's always going to be constant. So we'll have that as our class object attribute. And then we will create our instantiation method or init method. And we'll say self. So we always pass in that keyword self just to let Python know that this is a method that's related to this object. And then what we're going to do here is have a radius. And then we will say self.radius is equal to radius. So we have this very simple circle method. So if I say my circle is an instance of the circle class, note I have to have open close parentheses here. It says missing the radius, so let's provide one. We'll go ahead and say radius is 2. And then if I check out my circle, dot radius, it gives me back 2. Now let's say I don't always want to have to provide something. Maybe I want a default radius in case I don't provide one. Then all I have to do here is say is equal to, and we can set the default radius to be 1. So when I redefine that circle class to include that default value, I can then run this again and the radius will default to 1. So that's our class object attribute, and that's the only attribute our circle needs is a radius. Now let's have a method. And a method looks very similar to a function, except that it's actually inside this class, and the very first parameter it's going to take is self. And let's create a method that calculates the area of a circle. So it's going to return self.radius times self.radius times pi. So pi r squared is the area of a circle. And in order to call the class object attribute, instead of calling self.pi, we can go ahead and call circle.pi to indicate that it's a class object attribute. And I'm going to run this cell again to add those additions to our circle class. Run this again, and then I can call radius, but I can also call my circle. And then if I hit tab here, I have area, pi, and I also have radius. Area. And if I just run area like this, it'll say bound method a circle area on this circle object at this point in memory. If I want to execute it, just like I would with a function, I need to add in those open close parentheses, and then it returns back the area. In this case, 1 times 3.14 is just going to be 3.14. So let's go ahead and create a circle for a radius of 3 so I can see the results. So a radius of 3 means the area is 28.26, or roughly about that. So let's explain the syntax a little further. This is a method right here. This area method knows that it's a method instead of a normal function because we passed in that self keyword, which essentially says, hey, this isn't just some function we happen to be defining. This is a method that's going to refer to this actual circle class. And then if we want to use the attributes of this current iteration of the circle, we call self.radius instead of just calling radius. And the reason we do that is to let Python know that I'm talking about the radius that was defined here when we initialized our version of the circle. And then we multiply it again by radius, and then we call circle.pi, which is this class object attribute. Let's go ahead and show another example by creating a perimeter method. So we can say def perimeter self, and the perimeter of a circle is just 2 times the radius. Note here, I have to use self.radius, otherwise it's not going to know what radius I'm talking about. And then I can say circle.pi if I need to use the class object attribute pi up here. So then when I run this all over again, I can say my circle. I can call perimeter. And remember, if I just call perimeter like this, it's going to report the method. I need to actually execute the perimeter class or method, run that, and I get the perimeter of my circle, or at least an estimate of it. Now, these methods are quite simple. They only take in the self argument, but you can also have additional parameters as long as they start with self. So let's say I wanted to report something method. That's going to take in self, and I can have in other parameters such as, let's say, name. And I can say return report, and then we can say dot format name. And if I rerun this again, radius, area, perimeter, I can say my circle, hit tab, notice I have report something, and then this will expect something to report. So I can say John, and it'll say report John. So that's how you can have methods that also take in parameters. Because recall, for other objects, like the list we created earlier, if we go all the way back up here at the top, some of these methods needed to take in parameters that you provided, such as appending a new number or counting how many times it occurred. So you have options there to add in additional parameters. What you should always start off with, however, is that self keyword, which basically tells Python again that this is a method, not just some function. It's a method that's connected to itself here in the circle class. All right, so that self notation is very important. Let's go ahead and show you inheritance. Inheritance is a way to form new classes using classes that have already been defined. Often, you're going to have similar classes and you don't want to have to repeat all your work. So you can use inheritance to form a new class based off of previous work. Now to do this, we're going to build out a class, and this class is going to be called person. We'll have an init method, self, first underscore name, last underscore name, and we'll create the attributes as well. So we'll say self first name is equal to the first name you pass in, and then we'll say self dot last name is equal to the last name you pass in. And later on, we're going to discuss why this init method has this set of double underscores. It indicates that it's a special method, so we'll discuss special methods in just a bit. But for right now, just make sure your syntax matches. And then we will also say def report self, and it's just going to print something out. Notice I'm not returning anything, I'm just going to print something out. It's going to say I am, and we are going to say dot format, and we'll say self dot first name, self dot last name. So if I create an instance of this person, I need to pass in a first name, so we'll say James, pass in a last name, Bond, and now I can say p dot report, and I execute the report method, and it prints out I am James Bond. Let's add in one more method to this that says def hello self, and it just prints out hello. So I have this person called James Bond that can report who he is, and he can also say hello. Now the second class we're going to do is called agent. Now every agent may be a person as well, so it may be nice if agents can report who they are and if agents can say hello. So we will say class agent, and now we are actually going to pass in something here. We're going to pass in the person class because I want to be able to use everything that I've worked with here. I want to be able to use this report method or use this hello method, and in order to do that, I can inherit the class. And this is sometimes also known as extending the person class to the agent class, depending on which way you think about it. If agent is inheriting from person, or if person is extending to agent. Either way, we're going to pass in person into that agent class. We're going to have our init method again here, and we're going to say self, comma, first name, and then last name. And an agent should also have a code name. So we'll have this, and then what we're going to do here is inside this instantiation or init method, I will say person, and I will call that init method of the original, the person, and then I will say self, first name, last name, and then I will say self code name is equal to code name. Now the syntax can be confusing at first. Let's go ahead and define what's happening in each of these lines. The first thing we're doing is from agent, we are inheriting the person class. So we want to use these methods report and hello from the person class. So we will go ahead and inherit it. Notice here how I'm not calling open and close parentheses after person. I'm just passing in person straight by itself. Then we have our own init method for agent, and it takes in a first name, a last name, and a code name. Then what it does is using that first name and last name provided, it instantiates person by calling in person.init self, first name, and last name. And then the extra parameters that are specific to an agent instead of just to a person, we go ahead and add in self dot and then whatever the attribute name we want, matching up with the parameter that's passed in. So that's the main part of inheritance. And if I run this and I create a new agent, so we'll say agent, we'll call it variable x, is an agent, and they have a first name. We'll give first name Alan. We'll say their last name is Turing, and their code name is Hero. So if we say x dot and hit tab, we can grab the attributes code name, first name, last name, but then we can also have them say hello, and we can also have them say, give a report. I am Alan Turing. So notice how we were able to inherit the hello method and the report method from the person class. Now, since this is an agent, we probably don't want them saying their real name by just asking report. So if I ever want to overwrite a method that I inherited, I can just come down here and redefine that method. I can say def report pass in self, and now I'm going to overwrite the self or the report method that came in from person. So instead of reporting my name, I'm going to print out, sorry, I cannot tell you my real name. Print, but you can call me, and then we'll format in their code name. Say format self dot code name. So same thing, we create that agent, they can say hello, except now when you ask them to report, instead of reporting their name, we were able to successfully overwrite the report method from person, and now we have our own report method for agent. So it says, sorry, I cannot tell you my real name, but you can call me Hero. So besides inheriting other methods from this class and being able to overwrite them, we can also then add in new methods. So we can add a new method called TrueName in case we ever do want to report our true name. And this can take in the self keyword, and it can also maybe take in a passcode. So you need to provide a passcode in order to learn the real name of this agent. So we'll say if the passcode is equal to 123, print correct passcode, and then we can go ahead and just copy this right here, the actual reporting of the name. So we'll copy this, come back down here, paste it in. So that's if the passcode provided is 123, it's correct. Else, what we're going to do is we will just say, sorry, I can't tell you my real name. But instead of copying and pasting, all we have to do is say self dot, call the report method. So this just tells this class that if this passcode provided is not 123, then just execute your own report method. And that's what's so key about using the self keyword, whether it's an attribute or a method call. It lets Python know that you're referring to its own methods, not some other function in the global namespace. So now if I run this, whoops, let's make sure we have correct syntax. We need this to be equals equals. Now let's run this, there we go. So we have Alan Turing, codename Hero. They can say hello. If we ask them to report, they won't tell you their real name. If we ask them, let's say true name, and we pass in the wrong passcode, they'll say, sorry, I cannot tell you my real name, but you can call me Hero. So they keep calling report. If I do pass in 123 as the correct code though, they say correct passcode, I am Alan Turing. And then finally, what we need to discuss are special methods and also private methods, We've seen a couple of special methods, specifically this init method, and it's denoted as special due to its double set of underscores. So in the very next lesson, we're going to finish our discussion of object-oriented programming by talking about private methods and special methods. We'll see you there.